everything in our lives. Usually we kind of go along with our lives. We don't completely question everything. It would take a lot of resources. But when you are suicidal, when you put everything in question, you have actually opportunities that are there, because you say, well, now I have the strength maybe not to do the things that I've been doing before, and trying to look for other solutions. Maybe it wasn't so meaningful what I was really fighting for. I was trying to be like a famous pop star, didn't make it.
Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't so important.
You're talking about yourself?
No, I wasn't. No, I'm talking about myself. Okay. Maybe we can... I was thinking about an example, actually. It was a singer, I can't remember his name, that did end his life, had a very successful career when he was like young teenager. I think Little Chris wasn't his name. So he had a really successful start, and then he was constantly trying to keep up with this success that was very elusive. Sure. And then in the end he ended his life, right? It's a complex decision that people make, right? But when you question everything, you might see other issues. You might be, if you're helped, right? If there's not a focus on managing risks, but there's a focus on trying to, create something new, to try to give you some hope, trying to, listen to you. So that's, I think, what really matters. And so it's not only that the risk management culture doesn't have an evidence base to work, but it can be counterproductive.
It sort of gets in the way of building the relationship with the client.
But how can I build a relationship of trust of a person if I know that if they say, oh, you know what, I'm really thinking of suicide, I'm going to start putting them on a ward. How can they be open about it? So when they say end the stigma, you need to be able to talk about mental health issues. The onus can't just be on the person that's not talking. The onus has to be on who listens. Because if somebody doesn't talk about things, there might be reasons why people don't talk about things. We need to be able to listen and to accept that there are people that are self-harm, there are people that are hearing voices, there are high-risk situations, and that risk is not the only way in which we can learn about these things, really, that we can save lives. Because really the meaning of words for people, we need to consider it's different from one person to the other. So, for example, if somebody says, I'm hearing voices, I'm self-harming, whatever the risk is, then you need to know how this meaning was built throughout the person's life. And this is another thing. So one of the issues that you have when you concentrate on things that are not really very meaningful, like these risk assessment protocols, is you don't concentrate on things that are very meaningful. So, for example, what's this person's story? In many services that I've been in working, I was shocked by the fact that there was really not much emphasis on how we got to this stage. So a person was...
It's kind of a bit of an afterthought, or people see it as like a bit of it's a triviality.
It's as
thinking about, that's their story, interesting. But,
blah, blah.
What are the things that they actually present with, rather than thinking about how the things that they present with tie into the larger picture. Picture of somebody's life story and the events that brought them to their current situation.
Or if you're lucky, they say, they do this because they have a difficult past. But there's no kind of saying,
what is that past?
And how exactly does that difficult past mean that this person is behaving in this way now? Why is this person really be exploiting other people, for example, in light of their past? How does that happen, and how can we use that information to challenge that behavior in a way that is going to not just respond to the limiting risks, but to give something to the person that is what they need? So I find that there's a culture that has to change completely. That is not just about not doing risk assessments.
Because I was going to say, I'm not sure that the answer is to completely,
that's what they think.
To tear up risk assessments. I think it's about having risk assessments, but then also focusing more on that, focus of somebody's story, a relational way of working, and so on. So that risk assessments are there, but maybe they're done in a different way, but that they're not the primary focus, and that there's more of a focus on positive risk taking as well.
Well, I think that the issues that so one of the big when again in the rare cases when you can discuss this with managers at any level, one of the things they come up with, right, so you don't want to do anything, you just want to leave people on their own and don't address the difficulties they're having. So I think we need to address complex issues, but we need to address them in their complexity. And I don't think that you can define any single issue exclusively on a dangerousness dimension. And that is unfortunately what risk assessments do. So the fact that you say, I don't want to look at self-harm or hearing voices as a risk, doesn't mean that then you're not going to do anything about it. Quite the opposite. It means you're going to look at what this person needs. And by looking at what this person needs, you're going to be able to create more safety.
Sure.
Right. So it could be that in this moment, it's better that that we don't insist on self-harm because this is not going to go anywhere, right? Or it could be, look, you know what? I think in this moment we could start. This person keeps bringing up the voices they hear. We could ask this person, when did these voices start, or what meaning does it have for you that the voice tells you whatever, that you're terrible, that you're worthless, do you feel that way? And so
how do people commonly manage risk in terms of hearing voices at the moment?
Well, take your meds is a common way, so they need to take medication. Then this is, again, another thing that we can talk about. I'm not an expert on this field, but there's no univocal consensus.
Sure.
There is in the establishment in Britain that if you are if you're hearing voices, then you need to take medication. That's the only way. That's the beginning at the end of the story. If you think, as I do, that voices have a meaning, so that they're not purely casual things that the brain makes up, but that they're a reflection of your story, of the way you got to where you got, then you can see, maybe you can use that as an opportunity as well in some way. But I'm not against then people taking medication, for example, to reduce the impact of voices. Sure. I just don't think that's something we should impose in a kind of a unilateral way as a way of managing risk. Okay? Yeah. So then, of course, I'm in favor of having a police force in our society. So clearly, if somebody is going to murder someone, you're going to call the police, right? But that's an issue of public safety, right? We're talking about criminality. This is not something very often happens with people with mental health issues, that they're killing others. This is kind of a representation that society has, because it's scary to suffer, but to see that somebody suffers, but usually they're not violent, right? So there is a lot that can be said about simplifications in terms of intervening in a repressive way to stop a homicide or to stop really serious situations. But from a therapeutic perspective, you need to see the complexity of this situation. That's where risk assessment as a mentality fails. And you won't see it necessarily immediately, or you might not see it at all, right? Because you might say, we really tried to make this person stop self-harm, and then they end in their life. If only they had listened to us, And you're missing the fact that you didn't listen to this person, really. You just went through your tick boxes.
Sure.
Right? So... I think we need, and again, we will at some point, but we'll talk about Trieste, Italy, and the training that I got. But I was never told you need to do a risk assessment. Never felt the need with a patient who struggled.
You were telling me that story earlier of the patient in the straitjacket.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Maybe one of the next episodes, but of course, the services in Trieste were inspired by this psychiatrist, Franco Basaglia. Not very known in the English-speaking world, known elsewhere. So people from maybe from Brazil. He had
Chile.
But in Brazil he had a lot of impact, for example, in other countries as well. So might know more about this than our British listeners. But Basaglia had a huge influence. So there was this legend that we don't know if it's accurate or not, that it actually happened like this. But he was like managing an asylum and trying to change it, to destroy it from within, really. And so the nurses brought a person in a straitjacket into his office, and this person was really agitated. And they said, well, what do we do with this? And he said, untie him immediately. And then this person calmed down, right? So that's to say that's completely counterintuitive, because you would think, no, if somebody's really violent, you need to restrain this person. You need to you can't just free him.
Yeah.
You know, so,
which is the current
kind of view in Britain, right? So I can see why people would think, no, if there's a risk, you really need to be repressive. You really need to manage the risks.
Yeah.
And that's a trap. That's what I hope with this episode we've managed to kind of put that doubt in some people, maybe professionals, that can go horribly wrong, actually, that type of mentality. Sure. That you think you're doing the right thing, and you're not listening to what this person's trying to tell you. The problem there was the straitjacket, the fact this person couldn't move, couldn't express anything. Yeah. And so that's why it was really angry, this patient. But anyway, yeah. I want to, before we close this episode, do you have anything to say about the subject matter?
Nothing whatsoever.
Nothing. Except you said we should have risk assessments. So we have.
I said, what do you mean?
You said we should have risk assessments and something else.
Well, I mean, I don't think that we should have a culture where we completely ignore risk altogether. But I agree that it's that we don't just have risk, and it's not just like because that's limiting people. Because in risk management culture, you could choose to remove somebody from a situation because you think, oh, that situation there's too many risks in that situation, so the only safe thing to do is to remove them from it entirely. Whereas actually, if you leave them in that situation but provide them with the support, I'm being deliberately vague. But
do you think that there's
if you provide them with the support, then they have the potential to grow. And I think what we're doing is not enough focus on how people grow. As opposed,
do you think there's a behavior?
Risk management doesn't necessarily help you to grow.
Yeah. Do you think there's a behavior that is exclusively a risk, with no other value attached to it?
Can I think of one that is exclusively a risk? Yeah. Not on the
so
spot. I don't know.
That's why.
But maybe there are people out there who can.
Maybe there's people out there. But that's why I don't believe in risk assessment. That's why I don't think. Yeah. I don't think we should ignore issues.
But we shouldn't ignore risk, and I think there's going to be. There's certainly going to be sectors. I know we're focusing specifically a lot here on suicide and self-harm and so on. But I think there's going to be sectors where risk assessments and so on are very important. Like if you're working with children, for example, I think there's definitely value in them, but again, it's the approach. Sure. It's the approach that you take to them, and how you focus on helping people to grow rather than removing them from a situation or isolating them. Thinking that is what creates safety, whereas the actual safety comes from the growth. I would say.
Sure. No, I think you're saying, well, we should look at risk and other things as well. Yeah. I think that there's no distinction between risk and other things. I'm not saying we should ignore the issue. Sure. I think that the issue in itself cannot be explained as a risk exclusively. Yeah. That it's a holistic experience. So I think we're saying the same thing, but we're different in different ways. Okay, anyway, so our social media, we always want to remind you, because we will be uploading episode once every 2 weeks. We'll try to do that. But we will keep you updated. So our Twitter account is at APOS Podcast.
APOS Podcast.
Yeah.
Our Instagram is the same, at APOS Podcast.
And
our email address is apospodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah. And patreon.com/APOS Podcast if you want to support us financially. Yeah, that helps. But please write email to us, ask questions, give us feedback, and we'll speak to you again in a couple of weeks.
See you then.
See you. Bye bye.